Picture this for a moment. A bright orange McLaren, 250,000 pounds of hand-built British supercar sitting outside a pub in Chipping Norton on a Saturday morning in July, the kind of car that stops traffic, the kind of car that makes strangers pull out their phones without thinking. And in the passenger seat, wearing his best clothes, buckled in and ready, a 5-year-old boy named Oscar. His dad is inside the pub, having a pint with his groomsmen. Because that is how Caleb Cooper begins his wedding day. Exactly as he begins every other day. On his own terms, in his own county, without a single concern for what anyone watching might think about it. 3 years before that moment, that same man was driving a different kind of vehicle across Oxfordshire. A contracting truck, running jobs for rates that barely covered the diesel, delivering vegetable boxes, working every hour that existed in a week and watching most of the money leave before he could do anything interesting with it. Yesterday, he got married at a 500-acre estate 5 minutes from the farm that changed everything. And the man sitting at the reception, with an unlimited bar of beer he brewed himself, watching it all unfold, was Jeremy Clarkson. Weeks out of cancer surgery. Still recovering. There anyway. This is the story of Caleb Cooper's wedding day. And what it quietly says about one of the most unlikely, most genuine friendships British television has accidentally produced. Caleb Cooper married Tia Wilkinson on Saturday, the 5th of July 2026 at Mariscourt, a 500-acre working estate in Oxfordshire. Sitting minutes from Diddley Squat Farm and from every field Caleb has worked since he was old enough to climb into a cab. He was born in this corner of the Cotswolds. He learned to farm it. He met Tia here. He found whatever strange version of famed television delivers here. And now he has been married here. For a man who once told an interviewer he rarely traveled further than Banbury, the geography of his life is remarkably consistent. Most people spend their 20s trying to escape wherever they grew up. Caleb Cooper spent his 20s going deeper into it, learning it, working it, building a life inside it, until the life became something nobody who knew him at 19 could have predicted, and he still hasn't moved more than a few miles from where he started. That is not a small thing. That is almost a radical act in 2026. He left for the ceremony from a local pub. Groomsmen alongside him. Pint presumably consumed. Then the McLaren. Then Mariscourt. Then the rest of his life. The car arrived and it was impossible to look at anything else. Orange, loud without making a sound. Oscar in the passenger seat, grinning the way 5-year-olds grin when they are doing something they will be told about for the rest of their lives but cannot fully understand yet. The man who used to cover Oxfordshire in a contracting truck, arriving at his own wedding in one of the most recognizable sports cars on the planet with his son riding shotgun. There is a version of that image that belongs in a film. Caleb just lived it on a Tuesday of a week that happened to fall on a Saturday. Tia wore a flowing white gown. A tiara. A veil. A bouquet of wildflowers that looked like she had chosen them herself rather than outsourced that decision to anyone with a clipboard and a seating chart. She looked by every account and photograph that emerged over the following 24 hours exactly like herself. Which is the only thing worth looking like on your wedding day. Caleb wore a suit. Yellow tie? They stood in front of a tractor for their photographs afterward. That was the only photograph that needed to be taken. Everything else is optional. His Instagram post went up the following morning. Characteristically short. Characteristically him. Such an amazing day yesterday celebrating our wedding. We both had the most amazing day, Mr. and Mrs. Cooper. More pics to come. Don't worry. 3 million followers saw it within hours. The comments filled up the way comments fill up when people are genuinely happy for someone rather than performing happiness for someone. That distinction is visible. It always is. The guest list deserves its own paragraph. Jeremy Clarkson was there. Lisa Hogan alongside him. Cast members from Clarkson's farm were in attendance. And Eddie Hall, the man who in 2017 lifted 500 kilograms off the ground, became the world's strongest man, spent the years since transforming himself into a professional heavyweight boxer, and somewhere in the middle of all of that became part of the extended Diddley Squat universe, was photographed at the celebration and shared his own images on social media the following day. The guest list read less like a wedding and more like the cast of the most improbable television show Britain has made in 20 years. The difference being that this was real. No script, no producer placing people in frame. Just Caleb Cooper's actual friends in a field in Oxfordshire with an open bar. Clarkson supplied the drinks. Specifically, an unlimited supply of Hawkstone beer and Hawkstone cider for every guest at the reception. The beer brewed on the farm where Caleb has spent the last 5 years of his working life. Served at the wedding of the man whose presence in that farm story helped make the brand what it is. By the man who owns the farm, the brewery, and the column inches, and who showed up anyway, because that is what you do when your friend gets married. The West Oxfordshire District Council spent 4 years, and what one assumes was a meaningful quantity of ratepayer money trying to limit what Clarkson could do at diddly squat. Clarkson responded by turning the planning battles into the most compelling subplot of a farming documentary series, building a beer brand off the back of the audience that created, and then serving that beer at his farmhand's wedding while recovering from prostate cancer surgery. The council, presumably, is still reflecting on the return they achieved on that particular investment. Here is what makes Clarkson's presence at that wedding more significant than it first appears. 3 weeks before the wedding, in the final episodes of Season 5 of Clarkson's Farm, Jeremy Clarkson sat down with Caleb and farm manager Charlie Ireland, mid-conversation about harvest planning, and told them he had been diagnosed with prostate cancer. Aggressive, he said. Caught early. He expected to be fine. He would be out of action for a period of time. He said it the way he says most things, directly, without performance, and with an implication that the conversation should probably move on fairly quickly. It did not move on for the people watching. In the weeks since that episode aired, Caleb spoke publicly about how the news landed on him. He described Clarkson as his best mate. Not his employer, not his television co-star, his best mate. The person he calls, the person who calls him. The relationship that started as a production dynamic, the clueless celebrity landowner and the exasperated young farmer who has forgotten more about Oxfordshire soil than Clarkson will ever learn, became, across 5 years and 5 seasons, something neither of them planned and neither of them performs. Most long-running friendships start as something else. A working relationship, a shared project, a convenience that turns into a habit that turns into something you would not trade. What is unusual about Clarkson and Caleb is that theirs happened on camera, in front of millions of people, and still somehow became real. The camera usually prevents that. In this case, for reasons neither of them has ever fully explained, it did not. So when you look at the photograph, Clarkson at that reception, still recovering, Hawkstone in hand, watching Caleb and T.I. surrounded by the people who matter to them, you are not looking at a celebrity making an appearance. You are looking at a man who got in a car and drove to his friend's wedding because his friend got married. And because some things matter more than whatever your surgeon said about taking it easy for a few more weeks. Most of us have had a version of that person in our lives. Someone who showed up on a day when showing up cost them something. You do not forget it. The people who matter to you do not forget it. Caleb will not forget it either. T.I. Wilkinson and Caleb Cooper have been together for 10 years. That detail tends to get lost in every version of this story that focuses on the McLaren and the guest list, and the Hawkstone open bar. But it is the most important detail in it. They were childhood sweethearts. Teenagers in the same corner of Oxfordshire, falling into each other's lives before either of them had a television credit or a production company or 3 million people watching their Instagram. Before any of this existed, there was just Ty-A and Caleb and Chipping Norton growing up. Oscar arrived in March 2021, weeks before Clarkson's Farm first aired and weeks before anyone outside Oxfordshire knew Caleb Cooper's name. He was already a father before he was famous. That ordering matters. It means the foundation was built before the cameras arrived. The cameras did not build it. They just pointed at something that was already there. Then Willer in 2023, then Ashton, born last August. Born, specifically, while Caleb was mid-harvest in a field, and told Ty-A to hold on until he had finished the row he was cutting. Clarkson wrote about that moment in his column. He described Caleb as the boy wonder. Said Caleb had finished the field before heading to the hospital. How farmerish is that? He wrote. A friend suggested naming the baby after the field where Caleb had been working when the call came through. The field was called Dead Man. They went with Ashton. By any reasonable measure, the correct decision. Caleb proposed to T.I. on Christmas morning 2022. 3 children first. A ring on Christmas Day. A wedding 3.5 years later at a 500-acre estate in the Cotswolds? It is not the conventional sequence. It is, on the other hand, exactly the sequence that made sense for 2 people, who had been building a life together long before they got around to formalizing it. Now here is the part of this story that tends to get reported as a footnote when it is actually the whole point. Caleb Cooper is not famous because of Clarkson's farm. He is famous because of what he built while Clarkson's farm was pointing its cameras at him. That distinction matters enormously, and almost nobody makes it. The production company accounts this channel has covered previously show equity approaching £99,000 and a profit of £666,000 in a single year. Not from television fees. From content, from brand, from the audience Caleb built and retained and converted into something durable. 3 Penguin bestsellers carry his name on the cover. An Amazon content deal exists that was negotiated independently of Clarkson's farm entirely. The contracting business, the one that predates the show, the one that was running when the rates barely covered diesel, is still running. And above all of it sits a holdings company that exists, by its specific legal structure, because Caleb Cooper intends to buy land. The orange McLaren is not the story. The 500-acre wedding venue is not the story. They are what the story produced. The actual story is a young man from Chipping Norton who started at 50 pence an hour, took every door the last 5 years open for him, built something real and scalable while the cameras were focused on the man who owns the farm, and never once pretended to be anything other than exactly what he is. He is, in that respect, almost aggressively unusual. For someone with 3 million followers in 2026, the internet rewards performance. Caleb Cooper rewards people who can tell the difference. The television industry has spent decades perfecting the format of the reluctant rural star. The salt of the earth type. The man of the land. Managed, packaged, accent preserved, edges softened until the authenticity becomes a costume you can buy in the gift shop. Caleb Cooper arrived wearing his actual clothes, speaking in his actual voice, with opinions about farming that were formed in fields rather than in development meetings. 3 million people found it so genuinely unfamiliar that it felt like relief. That is not a small achievement. That is a very specific kind of genius that looks, from the outside, like simply being yourself. What comes next is already in motion. Caleb Down Under is in production. A 4-part Amazon Prime series following Caleb to Australia, his first solo major television project, his first commercial flight, his first attempt to take the contracting operation he has built across Oxfordshire and find out whether it works on the other side of the world. He described the decision in his own words. I spend most of my time with the most traveled man in the world. So I got brave and booked my first ever flight to see what all the fuss was about. The man who has spent his entire working life within a few miles of Chipping Norton. On a plane. To Australia. With cameras. Season 6 of Clarkson's Farm has been confirmed by Amazon, with production expected to begin in 2027 subject to Clarkson's recovery progressing as anticipated. The harvest will still need doing. The planning battles with West Oxfordshire District Council will presumably continue providing the entertainment. Charlie Ireland will be there. Caleb will be there. The farm will still need managing by someone who actually understands it. But none of that is the point this particular weekend. The point is this. The boy from Chipping Norton who started working land he could not yet afford to own drove to his wedding in a £250,000 McLaren with his son in the passenger seat, stood in front of a tractor for his wedding photographs, and sat down to celebrate with his best friend, who had brewed the beer being served and driven there from surgery recovery, because that is the kind of friend he turned out to be. Caleb did not leave Oxfordshire to build his life. He did not move to London. He did not chase the rooms where the decisions get made. He stayed in the fields where he learned everything he knows and he made the decisions come to him. And they did. And they keep doing it. He married the girl he has loved since they were teenagers. In the county where he was born. In front of his 3 children. 5 minutes from the field where all of it started. That is as good a Saturday as anyone in British farming has had in a very long time. If you watched Clarkson's Farm and found yourself actually caring about what happened to those people, not as television characters, but as real people making real decisions in a real place, drop a comment below. Tell us where you're watching from. Tell us what this story means to you. Because Caleb Cooper's wedding happened in a field in Oxfordshire and somehow ended up mattering to people watching from places Caleb has never been and may never go. And that, when you think about it, is the most Caleb Cooper thing about any of this. Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Cooper.